On November 22nd, 1963, America woke up like any other day. The sun was shining in Dallas, Texas. Crowds gathered along the streets. Families brought their children. People smiled, waved, and waited. They were waiting to see their president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. At just 46 years old, he was young, charismatic, and full of promise. To many Americans, he represented the future. But before the day would end, that future would be shattered. At 12:30 p.m. in Dealey Plaza, 3 shots echoed through the air. In less than 9 minutes, everything changed. Our president was assassinated. A nation was traumatized, and America lost something it would never fully regain. This was not just the murder of a man. It was the moment trust began to collapse. The moment doubt entered the American soul. People would ask questions that still remain unanswered today. Who really killed John F. Kennedy? Was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone? And why does this moment still haunt the world more than 60 years later? Because what happened in Dallas didn't just change history. It changed how America sees power, politics, and the truth itself. This is the story of the 9 minutes that changed America forever. To understand why the assassination of John F. Kennedy shook the nation so deeply, we must first understand who he was and what he meant to the American people. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was not like the presidents before him. When he took office in 1961, he was only 43 years old, the youngest elected president in American history. He was handsome, well-spoken, confident, but more than that, he was a symbol. At a time when America was trapped between fear and hope, Kennedy offered something powerful: belief in the future. He spoke of progress, of unity, of sacrifice for the greater good. In his inaugural address, he challenged Americans with words that would become immortal. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Those words didn't just inspire, they defined a generation. Kennedy represented a new America, one that believed science could take humans to the moon, that civil rights were not optional, and that leadership required courage. Under his presidency, the United States faced some of its most dangerous moments. The Cold War was at its peak. Nuclear war felt terrifyingly possible. And yet, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy stood firm, avoiding catastrophe through restraint and resolve. To many, he proved that strength didn't have to mean recklessness. But his popularity also created enemies. His support for civil rights angered segregationists. His refusal to fully invade Cuba frustrated military leaders. His clashes with powerful institutions made him dangerous to those who thrived in secrecy. John F. Kennedy was admired by millions and opposed by powerful forces. That combination, hope and hostility, would define both his legacy and his fate. By 1963, America was not at peace, even if it looked calm on the surface. The Cold War defined everyday life. Across the ocean stood the Soviet Union, a nuclear-armed rival with a different vision of the world. School children practiced duck and cover drills. Families built fallout shelters in their backyards. The fear of nuclear war was not abstract. It was personal. Just 1 year earlier, the world had stood on the edge of destruction. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought the United States and the Soviet Union closer to nuclear war than ever before. For 13 terrifying days, humanity held its breath. Kennedy's calm leadership avoided disaster, but it also created resentment. Some military leaders believed he was too soft, too cautious, too willing to compromise. At home, America was divided. The civil rights movement was forcing the nation to confront its deepest injustices. Peaceful protests were met with violence. Segregationists saw Kennedy as a threat to their way of life. Meanwhile, distrust in government institutions was quietly growing. The CIA, the FBI, the military-industrial complex. These were powerful organizations, operating largely in the shadows. Kennedy had challenged them. He fired CIA Director Allen Dulles after the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. He pushed back against generals calling for war. He spoke openly about the dangers of unchecked power. In 1963, America was a nation filled with tension, between left and right, between peace and aggression, between progress and fear. And in moments like these, history often turns violent. In November of 1963, President Kennedy was already thinking about the future. The 1964 presidential election was approaching, and Texas was critical. It was a powerful state, rich, influential, and politically divided. Winning Texas meant strengthening his chances for re-election. But Texas, especially Dallas, was not friendly territory. Dallas had a reputation. It was deeply conservative, strongly anti-Kennedy, anti-civil rights, anti-federal government. Just weeks before the visit, protest signs had appeared across the city. One infamous newspaper ad accused Kennedy of betraying the Constitution. Security officials were aware of the hostility. The risks were discussed. Warnings were raised, and yet the decision was made. Kennedy believed in visibility. He believed in connecting with the people. He believed fear should never control leadership. So the motorcade would be open. No bulletproof bubble. No roof over the limousine. Just the president, his wife Jackie, the Texas governor, and a smiling wave to the crowd. It was meant to be a show of confidence. Instead, it would become one of the most debated decisions in American history. Because sometimes history doesn't turn on grand speeches or wars. It turns on a single, fatal choice. The morning of November 22nd, 1963, began peacefully. President Kennedy and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy arrived in Dallas after a successful political trip across Texas. The mood was optimistic. The skies were clear. The crowds were growing. Jackie Kennedy wore a bright pink suit, a symbol that would later become one of the most haunting images in American history. At Love Field Airport, thousands gathered to see the president. People reached out to shake his hand. Children held flags. Supporters cheered. To many, it felt like a celebration. Inside the presidential motorcade, the atmosphere was relaxed. Governor John Connally and his wife Nellie sat in front of the Kennedys. Secret Service agents followed closely behind in their vehicles. The route through Dallas had been carefully planned. The motorcade would pass through downtown, then head to a luncheon where Kennedy would deliver a speech. Everything was on schedule. No threats had been reported that morning. No signs suggested what was about to happen. As the motorcade entered Dealey Plaza, the crowds thickened. The limousine slowed down to navigate a sharp turn. Cameras rolled. People waved. The president smiled. For a brief moment, it seemed like just another political visit. But history was already waiting. In the windows above, someone was watching. Somewhere in the city, a rifle was prepared, and the world was seconds away from changing forever. At 12:29 p.m., the presidential limousine entered Dealey Plaza. The car slowed as it made a sharp turn onto Elm Street. The crowd was close now. The president was fully visible. Just seconds later, a sharp sound cracked through the air. At first, many thought it was a firecracker. President Kennedy reacted suddenly, raising his hands toward his throat. A second shot rang out. Governor Connolly turned, confused, then screamed in pain as he collapsed into his seat. People froze. Then came the third shot, louder, clearer, deadly. The president's head snapped violently backward. Blood and bone exploded into the air. Jackie Kennedy instinctively climbed onto the back of the limousine, trying to hold together what could not be saved. The car accelerated. Secret Service agents jumped onto the vehicle as it raced toward Parkland Hospital. In the crowd, chaos erupted. People screamed. Others dropped to the ground. Some ran toward the grassy knoll. Some ran away in terror. In less than 9 minutes, the most powerful man in the world had been mortally wounded in public. All of it was captured on film. A Dallas dressmaker named Abraham Zapruder had been recording the motorcade with his home camera. Frame by frame, the footage showed the moment that would haunt history. The sudden movement, the fatal impact, the instant everything changed. That film would become one of the most studied pieces of evidence in modern history. And yet, it would answer almost nothing, because with each viewing came more questions. Where did the shots come from? How many shooters were there? And how could something this massive happen in plain sight? As the limousine disappeared from Dealey Plaza, America had already been wounded. It just didn't know it yet. The presidential limousine raced through the streets of Dallas, the sirens of the Secret Service and police screaming behind. At 12:36 p.m., it arrived at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Doctors rushed to the emergency room, their faces tense, focused, determined. Kennedy was alive, but barely. Every second counted. Jackie Kennedy stayed at his side, her pink suit soaked in blood. She held him, refusing to leave, refusing to let go. Doctors worked tirelessly, trying to save the impossible. They performed emergency procedures, but the damage was catastrophic. At 1 p.m., John Fitzgerald Kennedy was pronounced dead. The news spread like wildfire. The nation was stunned. Shock, grief, disbelief, all collided in one moment. America had lost its youngest president, its symbol of hope, its promise of a better future. And just like that, the country's sense of innocence was shattered. Almost immediately, law enforcement sought a suspect. Lee Harvey Oswald, a 34-year-old former Marine, became the focus of the investigation. Oswald had lived in the Soviet Union. He had communist sympathies, and he worked at the Texas School Book Depository, the very building from which the fatal shots were believed to have been fired. He was arrested later that day for the murder of a Dallas police officer, and then quickly charged with the assassination of President Kennedy. "I'm just a patsy," Oswald said repeatedly. But no one listened. And then, 2 days later, Oswald was shot, live on national television, by nightclub owner Jack Ruby. The world watched in disbelief. A man accused of killing the president was himself killed before facing trial. Suddenly, the story became more than an assassination. It became a mystery, a conspiracy, a riddle without an answer. Who really pulled the trigger? Was Oswald acting alone, or was he part of something larger? And why did the nation never get a chance to hear his full defense? With Oswald gone, questions multiplied. Speculation grew, and the seeds of doubt, which still linger today, were planted. In that instant, the line between fact and suspicion blurred, and the assassination of John F. Kennedy became not just a historical event, but a puzzle that generations would struggle to solve. With Oswald dead and the nation grieving, the search for answers began. The Warren Commission was formed. Their task: investigate the assassination, determine if Oswald acted alone, and provide closure to a shocked public. The report concluded that one man had fired 3 shots, and that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. But for many Americans, that answer was not enough. The single bullet theory seemed impossible to believe. How could one bullet cause so much damage, hitting multiple people in different positions? Questions lingered. Were there additional shooters? Did the CIA, the Mafia, or foreign governments play a role? Why was so much evidence missing or altered? And how could an event of such magnitude happen in broad daylight, in front of thousands? Jack Ruby's killing of Oswald only fueled the fire of suspicion. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Every new revelation only deepened the mystery. For decades, Americans have debated every frame of the Zapruder film, every testimony, every theory. Because some events are too significant to accept easily, some moments are too shocking to forget, and some deaths are too political to be explained fully. The assassination of John F. Kennedy left a wound not only in history, but in the American conscience itself. A wound marked by doubt, by speculation, and by the haunting question: can we ever really know the truth? The shots fired in Dealey Plaza did more than kill a president. They shattered a nation's sense of security, of innocence, of trust. For generations, America had believed in progress, in leadership, in the idea that the right person could guide the country safely. Kennedy represented that hope. When he died, that hope died with him. The news spread across the world. Televisions flickered in living rooms. Radio broadcasts trembled with grief. Newspapers screamed headlines that would never be forgotten. From that day forward, Americans would never view politics the same way. Every scandal, every war, every betrayal was filtered through the memory of November 22nd, 1963. Questions lingered, suspicions grew, and trust in institutions began to erode. The assassination marked the end of innocence. It marked the beginning of doubt, and it reminded a nation that history could change in a matter of minutes, and that no one, not even a president, was truly safe from the forces of fate and fury. Yet in the loss, there was also reflection, a reminder of the fragility of life, the fleeting nature of leadership, and the enduring power of memory. For decades, people have revisited those 9 minutes. They have studied the film, analyzed the evidence, and debated the motives. Because the story of John F. Kennedy is not just the story of a man, it is the story of a nation, a story of hope and fear, of faith and doubt, of a moment that changed America forever.